week 3 of 8 weeks with Persephone becoming the queen of the underworld. And this is the juicy part. And as always, I'm inviting you to feel into what happens when you think of this week. We're actually going to look at how to become the queen of the underworld. Remember, the underworld is really a representation of something that is maybe not so visible to us within ourselves, a shadow part, some part that we may not have expressed so well, that we may not have looked at. So this week we actually, instead of just going there and willingly descend in it, we don't just descend in it and say stuck there and dwell there. We actually become Persephone's story. The myth is about becoming the queen. So as always, I'd invite you to think of what does it mean for you to become the queen of the underworld, of your own hidden part. What does it mean? And in Persephone's story, what's important is we don't always look at, like I say, the deep dark. We look at all the facets. And a queen is also about reclamation, about being so part of it, but also emerging as reclaiming it and doing it in a way that is there to share. So when I was looking at how could a queen, what can she perhaps reclaim in the underworld, and how may she do it in different ways? When I looked at different facets of queen, I went back to the tarot as guidance of what would be at play for a queen and how would we emerge as the queen of our own underworld, our own hidden. And so when I looked at the tarot, I looked at the queens of the 4 suit cards. And if you're not familiar with the tarot, not an issue, but what it really just boils down to is queen of the cards that represent the 4 elements: fire, earth, water, and air. So let's just take fire for example. So there we have the Queen of Wands. Wands represent in the tarot the fire element. And when I was looking at how would a Queen of Wands, a queen with that fire element, if she goes in, what would she reclaim in her hidden side? And it may be something like her creativity. It may be something like her passion or her drive and all of that. That's what it may look like for the queen of the underworld, of wands, of fire. And then I thought, but her shadow side may be as if she dwells in there. And I personally am very familiar with that type of queen, the fire queen. When she goes into her own underworld, her shadow side might be very well things like burnout, or being too intense, or being too passionate. And that is what the Queen of Wands would, for instance, house. That's how she may emerge, and that's also her shadow side. Take, for instance, the Queen of Pentacles, which represent in the tarot earth, the earth element. So the Queen of Pentacles, she may think more of, the rooted matriarch. How would the Queen of Pentacles, what would she uncover, and how would she become her own? How would she emerge what would she reclaim in her own underworld? Maybe she would reclaim her physicality, her how to bring things in the world. But what the Queen of Pentacles, what her shadow side, she can get very stuck and very rooted in, and become very almost stagnant in that emerging, in her own underworld. What would the Queen of Cups, the water element, what could she perhaps reclaim? Maybe something like her sexuality, her sensuality, her emotional landscape. She may reclaim that in her underworld. But if she stays too watery and too much in that realm, she may risk the shadow side of being too fluid, being a martyr for, the emotional. She may get stuck in her own emotional reclamation. Which one haven't I addressed? The Queen of Swords. So that's the air element. And the Queen of Swords, she may reclaim very much her focus, her dreams. It's very much about the intellect as well. She may reclaim that in the underworld. But she also may get stuck there and become too aloof, too focused, too far removed from her emotional side. So it's fairly simple to just tap into what is at play for you, because as you go into your underworld, you want to also understand there, what do I need to know? What do I need to look out for? What is it that I'm reclaiming there? Otherwise, we get lost in the underworld. If you think of the queen, she emerges with a certain ability to master one aspect, and that's what these cards beautifully tell us. So if you look at them, you can always, as you go into the underworld, it's not because we sometimes fear, what I'm going to go and find. But you may find all this juicy stuff. You may find you reclaim all of the stuff, but always be aware of the shadow. So that is what it means to actually emerge as the queen of the underworld. And what is also so beautiful for me about Persephone is, as she went into the underworld, remember Hades was who abducted her, or who she went into the underworld. Hades was feared by a lot of the other mortals and the other gods, because he was hidden. He was the side that they didn't know. But what Persephone actually did is she got to know him. And that's ultimately what I also want to invite you, because we can think, wow, this is such a feared part, this is such a hidden part. But what Persephone teaches us is the willingness also to not descend, but also to get to know, to learn to see another side of that. And that's where these cards, or the tarot queens, can help us to go in with maybe a bit of focus, maybe a bit of a flavor of what is it that I can find, what is it that is buried, and what is the shadow side of finding that. It becomes such a rich exploration when you actually go into the underworld. So that's really that's really the essence of what I want to share in the queen, in being in the descent and becoming queen of the underworld. And what is also lastly, what I also just want to share is, remember, we're only in week 3. There's 8 weeks. So the queen in this case is not the ultimate. So sometimes we think, well, that's basically where we've landed. I'm now queen, or, I've mastered something. But what this journey teaches us is that is part of the journey. It is reclaiming that part as the queen. If you hear my dogs, they're playing outside. But it's reclaiming that part of the queen, and then also knowing that there's something beyond that's just part of the journey. So those are the kind of thoughts that I want to share with you as you sit this week in emerging and becoming victorious in the underworld. Just to have a perspective of how do I do it? What are the kind of things that I look at when I delve a bit deeper? What do I find? What do I look for? How do I merge? And then ultimately knowing that the journey still continues. So happy exploration and happy emerging as the radiant queen that you are. Speak to you soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.